Hello my friends and welcome to Jessie James Beads. How are you doing today? It is Thursday the 27th of October. I can't quite believe it's that time already. The winter seems to be drawing a little bit closer, but I'm still enjoying the autumnal leaves. How are you doing today? Have you had a beautiful day? What have you been up to? Where are you watching from? I'm going to drop you down to the board for a second because I want you to take a look at the strands that you might get to work with on a project like that which we're going to explore together today. So we are looking at the Pantone Pearls collection. I am just going to press some buttons and see if I am out there in internet land on Facey. Let's hope that you can see me. I can see that we are streaming, so that's a good start. So Pantone Pearls for the fall to winter of 2022. These are absolutely gorgeous. Every strand is thoughtfully curated with beautiful colours that are just outstanding. So there's quite a lot to choose from. Tutau is in from Texas and Jessica has joined us. Huggles to myself and to everyone. Lovely to have your company, my darlings. Thank you for joining us today here live on Facey with Jessie James Beads. So we are going to look together at making some stacking bangles. Now the way that we're going to create these means that they can be worn either as a solid bangle that you don't need to take off the wrist, or if you're creating for somebody whose wrist size you don't know, they have a clip and clasp in them. I've made a couple of samples because I couldn't help myself with these beautiful, beautiful Pantone pearls. But before we get cracking with our tutorial today here with Jessie James Beads, what I'd like to do is show you each and every one of those colours. Apart from Amazon, I'm going to demonstrate with Amazon today. It's a glorious colour collection. Every one is a feast for the senses. So I've made my first stacking bangle with Martini Olive. I'm a huge fan of James Bond. Lynn is in from Louisiana. Glad to be here. Glad to have you here, my lovely. Thank you so much. So Martini Olive. We're going to look at this technique, which is a variation of my Galatea bangle, so named for Neptune's rings. So that's the Martini Olive colourway. We'll just show you the tag there. Bernadine has joined us. Hello. Celia Jane is in from Bolton. Can't craft at the moment. Painful after a flu jab. Hopefully you will fix yourself up very, very soon. Just rest and take it steady, my lovely. So the first of our strands today I've already made into a stacking bangle is Martini Olive. So let's pop that one out of the way for now. Lava Falls. Now what a sumptuous colour that is. Absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous, vibrant reds there and some also very, very beautiful, rich, deep tones. So that's Lava Falls. Show you the tag so you can see that one. And another one that I made a bangle with is Water Spout. Almost the antithesis of Lava Falls. I would 100% wear those two together. In fact, it kind of reminds me of the home strip and the away strip. So let's pop those ones out of the way and take a look at the rest of these strands. I've got Orange Tiger. It literally does what it says on the tag. That's gorgeous. I love working with what are sometimes referred to as glass pearls or faux pearls. They're beautiful, really, really gorgeous colours that you can achieve with these. Autumn Blonde, that's me. Born blonde anyway. Gorgeous teaming of gold with those soft, sandy, satiny colours. Really, really lovely. Next up we have got Caramel Cafe. Wow, what can I say? That's absolutely perfect. Hi everyone from Ms. Zach from Michigan. Hello Zach, how are you today? I hope you've had a beautiful day. That's beautiful. I am a bit of a coffee lover. So that's right up my street. Caramel Cafe. Nosegay, which is another word for a type of posy. Small bunch of flowers. Very, very floral in its tones there. Something very, very pretty and innocent about those pinks. And then we have got the other end of the scale with pinks. We've got rose violet. Each one of these strands can be made into a stacking bangle or exactly whatever you fancy. Rose violet is cool because you've got these metallic coated crystals that have got a hint of pink in them, almost a fuchsia metallic, and then teamed with the rest of these quite different pinks too. So that's rose violet. Samoan sun. Missing the sun at the moment. It's been rather dull and grey. Melanie says, me too, sweetheart, when it went auburn and now it's bottled, so we won't tell. I've just told everyone, sorry. I was born blonde and I've been most of the colours under the sun since then, and now I'm just natural blonde again with a sprinkling of grey. And I'm leaning into it, I'm accepting it. That's really, really pretty, beautiful sunshiny colours there in Samoan sun. Chiselled stone. Now this is the sort of colourway that's going to match perfectly with every and any skin tone, every and any outfit that you want to wear. I would even add lengths of chain to this and hazard a guess that this would be beautiful as an anklet. Really, really gorgeous. Chiselled stone. Shakisha is in. Hello, darling, how are you? Kay is in from Goose Creek, South Carolina. Well, that sounds lovely. Tell me, are there geese up Goose Creek? I like geese. I think they're quite good fun. They make excellent guard animals. Quite noisy little fellas. Now this is an absolute treasure. Midnight Pantone Pearls strand. Roberta is in. Hello to you. And all of Roberta's beady friends. Love those silver greys. Me too. Actually, these two together, I think I might mix and match those. So that's your chiselled stone, and we're now looking at the penultimate strand, which is midnight. I adore this. You've got a hint of pink over the surface of these crystals, and you've also got some slightly sultry, not quite transparent crystals at the centre there. Really, really beautiful strand. That's one of my strong contenders for favourite. I'm going to bring in the first three that I showed you again. Cherie, hello to you. Beautiful but lovely day in Oregon. Zach says, I'm good, darling. Those are ready-made, pretty indeed. They're all absolutely gorgeous. They are, absolutely. Melanie says, my favourite combo. Totally agree. A big aloha to Judy out in the Hawaiian Islands. How are you, sweet pea? MC is in from Greenville in Texas. Have a great day, everyone. I've just realised I've got the labels upside down. God, you can't get the staff these days. So Lava Falls is a stacking bangle. Martini Olive as a stacking bangle even. Water Spout. I've added a couple of little extras onto that one. Now, if you find that you've got some teeny beads on the strand which don't go onto your 18 gauge wire, we can absolutely still integrate them by making tidgy little charms and adding them onto the bangle. So that one is Water Spout. This is what we are going to be working towards creating today. Now, one of the reasons that I love this design is you can take a standard, let me just measure, I estimated them to be 7-inch. They are. You can take a standard 7-inch strand and make a complete piece of jewellery. Or, of course, you can separate these out and make lots and lots of different pairs of earrings, other bits and pieces of jewellery, rings and the such. The options are endless. I do love a Pantone collection because you get to see your favourite colour in there somewhere. Teresa is in. Hello, loves. I hope everyone is doing well. No rain today. Tampa will be wet tomorrow, though. I'm sure it will. Cherie says, gorgeous pearls. They are. They're beautiful. Really, really like this chiselled stone one. So you can take a strand, a 7-inch strand like this, and just make an instantly matched, beautifully coordinated piece of jewellery with every stone on the strand or every bead on the strand. Now, I have chosen to work with Amazon. It's a really, really gorgeous colourway. So this is the tag that came with Amazon. Really, really gorgeous colours. I can see why it was so named. You've got some AB coating on these crystals as well. You've got some of the little, they feel rubbery, but I think they might be clay spacers. You've got the standard and not so standard here. We've got big daisy spacers as well as rhinestone wheels. We've got crystals in both opaque and translucent. And we've got different colours in those crystals as well. They're really, really very, very pretty. So that's what we're going to work with today. You can combine for stacked treats. You absolutely can. And that's one of the reasons that I made so many. I got excited. I couldn't make one, I couldn't make two, so I made 3 in advance to show you how you can just plop those all on the wrist and how they're all going to match beautifully. Pantone strands like this are so well thought out. Every single bead has a function in your design. Now you may notice that every single one of those has gone over the hand. Now if you're pre-making for unknown wrists and hand sizes, that can be a bit tricky. So what I've done with this design, let me show you with Lava Falls, is created a clip attachment. It's very, very simple. When they are in wear, there's not a huge amount of pressure on them, and you can turn those ends over so there's a little bit more clippiness to them. Kay says, beautiful, my favourite colour. Is that the greens? It's absolutely stunning. Jem, can I ask for prayers? One of our favourite craft persons is very ill in hospital in the UK, heart and lungs. Her name is Maria. Let us all gather briefly together and have a quick think about Maria. Blessings to you, my sweetheart. I hope that your friend is soon in some kind of recovery. Teresa says, gorgeous is the perfect descriptor for that green. Gorgeous green. Absolutely it is. We are working today with Amazon. Now, I have pre-threaded this onto some 18 gauge wire, and I've allowed a good 15 inches, a good 15 inches. So I'm just going to put that to one side, and we're going to talk about the way in which we are going to enhance these bead strands as well. Afternoon from the Adirondack Mountains in New York. It's possible that one day I'll get that pronounced correctly. That day may not be today. Melanie is sending prayers, my lovely. Big hugs to you all, and I'm thinking of your friend Maria. So this clip section is a very, very simple technique. It takes a little bit of practice. So if you do have scraps of wire, it's worth practicing on the scraps before you get going on the technique. But that is at the end of stacking all of those beads onto a line of wire. Cherie says, thanks all so much. I know he hears us. Oh, bless you. Anne says, hi from California. I love the bracelet and the red colours. This is Lava Falls, sweet pea. Welcome, Anne. I hope all is well in California with you. The technique we're going to work on is based on my Galatea bangle, which is Neptune's rings. It's available free for everyone on YouTube if you want it. I'll pop a link down in the comments later. Kay says, yes, it's the green, and praying for Maria. Thank you very much. So I'm going to just pop these little stackers up to one side so that you can see those beautiful colours, and I'll give you a flash of all of those colours again at the end of our video together today. So I've cut myself a good 15 inches of round wire. This is 18 gauge. I'm working with Beadalon German style, which is a medium temper, and I tend to work with round wire where possible. If I ever work with anything that isn't round, I will tell you. Love those bracelets, says Cherie. Can't say words, sorry. It's because I was reading what Zach was saying about prayers all around for Maria. My words got muddled in my mouth. So I'm going to, if you're making along with me, you can stick all those beads on. If you have any left over that don't go on the 18 gauge, don't force them. We release the beads, unleash the beads, and then we respect the beads. We can always make them into little tiny charms to add on later. So I've got a small selection here which were a little bit tight on that 18 gauge wire, so I've left them out. Now what that means is we're slightly less than 7 inches in the length. Now I've made these so that they fit almost any size of wrist. They go over my hand. I have a medium size hand and a small size wrist. But what we're going to do is learn how to enhance those central beads with another layer of wire, and it's quite tricky to see on the blue. Let me pick up the red and we'll see if we can see that a little bit more clearly. So we've added some passes of wire to enhance those beads and add a little bit extra. Just a little bit extra. Of course you can just restrand them, they are gorgeous. Anne says, love the lavas and the blues, they're all gorgeous. Every single one of them is pretty. So I've pre-stranded all of my Amazon Pantone Pearls onto a piece of 18 gauge wire, 15 inches in length, and I've just turned the ends over. And that is to stop my beads from falling off, because my favourite trick is to spend huge amounts of time getting everything threaded up and then dropping one end so that everything goes horribly, horribly wrong. Which is not a favourite trick, it's just something that I tend to do. We're going to be also working with a second gauge of wire now. Cherie says, looks classy and more personalised. I totally agree. They do look beautiful without any further additions. But I like to make a bit of a change up. So I have another approximately 15 to 16 inches of wire. This time I'm using 20 gauge round wire. This again is beadle-on German style, so that's a medium temper, and it's a round wire again. So what I will do is make sure that this is nice and soft and fluid, especially in that midsection, because the middle of this second section of wire is where we're going to start working. Now what I like to do is to start in the middle and work outwards. So if we find our centre point, and just scooch all the other beads out to the side. This is my middle piece of the bangle that we're working together with today. And I think what I'd like to do is just highlight that central, beautiful, classy Amazon green bead by itself. So I've got my extra layer of wire, again 15 to 16 inches, again round medium temper German style, but this time it's a 20 gauge wire. So making sure that that central section is nice and smooth and warm, and you've added your little loops onto the end so things don't go flying. Trying to get that in the centre of your wire will absolutely help you because it gives you enough space to make the clasp on the end. So middle section of both pieces of wire, and what we're going to do is go over the top of the core. The core is the wire going through the beads that creates the nuts and bolts of our bangle for today. And I've just threaded the extra wire around so that it circles all the way around the top. And this is my Galatea or Neptune's rings design idea. So I'm just going to lay that over the top of the core wire and push the tail on the right hand all the way around until I have circled neatly and firmly around that core wire with the finer wire. Now I find it easier just to flip it all over because I'm right dominant, so I'm always going to be working where my better hand is over here. My other wrist is a little bit tricky, it has all kinds of things going on, so I tend to do most of my work on the right side. So I now have a new right hand side and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Finer gauge wire sits around the outside of the bead. Hold it in place, take the tail all the way around that central core wire and back in the opposite direction. So what we've done is we've created a Neptune's ring or a Galatea around the outside of that central bead. So you now have the opportunity to gather small sections of beads, or you can go one by one. I think I'm going to gather small sections. Now I've allowed 15 or so inches of the finer gauge wire, and that doesn't go all the way to the end. It gets about maybe 2/3 of the way around in totality. You have the opportunity, if you want to add on a good 2 foot, a good 24 inches of extra wire. And then that will allow you to make sure that every single bead will have a pass of wire around it. What that tends to do when you're working with a 7-inch strand is make a very large bangle. Now if you want a very large bangle, then do feel free to add extra wire. But what I'm looking to do is highlight the central section of the bangle, which is more likely to be seen on the wrist. So I'm going to gather a handful of beads at a time. And again, I'm going to apply some warmth to the next section of the extra wire. And instead of going from the top to the top like we did on the first piece, I'm going to make this as symmetrical as I possibly can. So the first thing I'm going to do is gather my 3 segments, draw the wire around, but take it underneath the core wire. So I've come from over the top of the core wire, around the side of the 3 beads, and I'm just supporting that with my non-dominant forefinger, taking the wire around the core and then off in the same direction. So it's come underneath, travelled all the way around once and continuing along. Now in order to make sure that I'm creating a symmetrical piece, which matters to me, it doesn't have to matter, but it matters to me, I'll bring the next 3 beads in on the opposite side. I'm going to flip the design over. And I'm going to look twice to make sure that I'm going to do the same thing as if we're working in a mirror. So the finer gauge wire has travelled around the outside of that central bead. I'm going to give that a quick warm through to make sure it's toasty and supple. Draw the 3 beads in, the same 3 beads as I had on the first side. Take the tail of wire all the way around and underneath. So I'm travelling from on top of the core wire, around 3 beads, and underneath the core wire. Bring the tail all the way around and then draw the tail off in the same direction it was travelling. So it goes underneath, comes up over the top and then continues on in exactly the same way. Teresa says, sorry for the language, but if I drop the beads on the chain and wire, I'm so frustrated I could throw the whole thing through the wall. Gosh, well, I feel you, sister. I know what you're saying. Jem, could you add seed beads onto the extra wire so they circle the pearl? You absolutely can. It's something I was planning on doing with these little babies. So you could add anything extra onto the finer gauge wire as you go. It's a halo technique. Again, it's another video that's available on my YouTube channel, completely free of charge. Halo a bead. Have a look at that and you will see how to work that to your advantage. So you can always add extras, or you can take some from the outer reaches, or you can use the teeny beads that sometimes appear on these strands. Let me just grab that really pretty midnight blue. So on this piece you have got 1, 2, 3, and maybe up here a 4th one. Yeah, so there's 4 really tiny crystals on this one, which would make a very elegant way to highlight your central bead. So that's a really good idea. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is have a look at my next selection of beads, and I think I'm going to circle around a daisy spacer, a large pearl and another daisy spacer, and then I will continue until I've used up my wire basically. So this time the wire is travelling from underneath that core wire. Push my beads into position, support the beads, take the tail over the top. So in the centre we go from top to top, and from then on we're always switching when we do a little swoosh around the beads. So from underneath to over the top, hold that in position whilst you draw the tail around. You can scooch that up with your nail. If you're precious about your nails, you can very, very gently use a plier to just draw that over. So because I've done it on one side, I now need to flip that around, bring the same number and size of beads as I did on the first side, and again noticing that my finer gauge wire is underneath the core, so it needs to travel around the side. I'm supporting with my non-dominant hand, bring the tail of wire over the top, so we're switching sides again. Draw that all the way around and the wire continues off. Now do just bring your ruler in from time to time to see how big your bangle is getting, because what you can do every time you're adding this little coil of wire between your sections of beads, you're making the bangle larger. If you're creating specifically for somebody with very tiny wrists, you may wish to remove the smaller beads, or you may wish to remove all of the metallics perhaps, and just have round and rondelle beads. There are ways in which you can use the very beautiful way in which these bead strands are set. So I've got Chiseled Stone and Midnight. I really like those two together. You could simply unleash the beads. I've got a thing now, that's my thing. You could unleash the beads and you could take out all of the metallics and the tiny ones and just use the combination of those actual beautiful... Now I don't know if they're referred to as glass pearls or faux pearls. I'm not entirely sure what the correct terminology is, but anyway, you can play around with your bead orders, you can play around with the number of beads on the strand and still benefit from the beautiful way in which they're created. For my stacking bangles, I simply re-stranded them onto that 18 gauge wire. So let's go for another couple of sections. I think this one deserves a little selection all by itself. I wonder actually, going back to what Cherie said about adding seed beads, let's see if I can get 2 on this piece and 2 on the opposite side. It might look a bit weird with just the 2, but it will show you what Cherie was talking about. So smoothing that wire through, and again we're working with that slightly lighter gauge of wire. So hopefully And this is why I pre-thread my beads, because me threading beads it's very dull because I can't always see to get them in. There we go. So what you would want to do is have more than just 2, but this will give you an idea of that haloing effect. So if I just draw that around and underneath, it doesn't look too spectacular because there's just the 2 of them. So why don't I add all of them on the one side and we'll see how we go. I've kinked the wire now. If that happens to you, just very, very gently tease the bead down without shattering it, because that would be incredibly sad. And then just move it down so that it sits closer to the bead that we are looking to create a halo effect around. So if I just add these on, you'll get the idea, although my bangle will no longer be beautifully symmetrical. So that's the kind of effect that you can achieve by adding extra beads on. So I might just slide one of those off, like so. And because my core wire began over the top, it's going to go underneath this time. So let's just draw that into position. Draw that extra tail of wire away. So that's what Cherie was talking about. Obviously my bangle is now going to be slightly off-centered because I didn't have enough beads to do that on both sides, but I can still take the core wire from over the top to underneath and draw that all the way around to create a wrap. Now you can do that for as little or as much of the design as you like. The technique is the same. You start in the very center, wrapping from on top of the core to on top of the core, highlighting your central bead, and then every other time you're switching. So what I'm going to do is cut away my wire close to that core. You may like to add another couple of turns around that core wire for stability, just to ensure that they would be nice and safe. But the technique remains the same. So we've decided that that's what our bangle is going to look like today. We've got our central bead, and then we've symmetrically, semi-symmetrically, coated that with beautiful swishes of wire all the way around. So you should be left with around about 4 inches of wire on either end, and that's what we need to create our hook and fastening. Looks like fun to make. Love the midnight and chiselled together. You know what, looking at these, that has to be one of my favourite. These two together. Let's just turn the labels over so you can see. Lava Falls and Water Spout together, Fire and Ice. And then we've got Midnight and Chiselled Stone, which is like Twilight and Moonlight together. Some really beautiful colour combinations that you can play around with these absolutely stunning faux pearl strands from the Pantone Pearl collection. Well, let me just pop those back out of the way. Okay, so looking at the design we have so far, we've got a strand of wire that's around about 15 inches long. At the centre, we've got all of the beads that we wish to use. We've highlighted some or all of them, and we have a tail of wire at either end. Now I want to show you a naked version of this design so you can see the mechanics clearly. So this is what the bangle looks like. You've got that around about 7 to 8 inches of wire with beads going around the middle. At one end you've got a heart-shaped clasp, and at the other end you've got a little double-pronged, it looks a bit like a tuning fork gone wrong, gone very wrong, but that clips into the heart shape. And I want to show you how to make those. If you decide, once you have created this, that the bangle is perfect in that size and you want it to just stay closed forever, what you can do, so let's say that the Martini Olive, that fits me and I want to keep it this size forever, but I don't want to unclip it at any time. I just want to secure it. What you can do is close up that clasp permanently, very, very gently, squeezing those 2 tuning fork gone wrong leggy bits down until they are sealed up. And in that way, that is now a solid bangle that will not come undone during wear. I mean, if you're going to go rock climbing, maybe don't wear a piece of jewellery made out of wire. But I wanted to show you the opportunity of how you can have these sat with a clasp that is fully functional. So it will fit almost any wrist size. I managed to get it hooked on forever there. But you can see that that does unhook and then hook back in. But if you want to keep that hooked up forever, let's close this one as well. You can just very gently squeeze those 2 little hooks down. Squeeze the 2 little hooks down, and you've got a permanent bangle. This one used those teeny tiny beads as little charms instead, but you could, as Cherie suggested, highlight the central bead or a central bead with some of those extra crystals. So if I pop those back out of the way, this is what we're going to learn how to make next. So you should have a good 3 or 4 inches of wire at either end. If you warmed your wire very, very thoroughly before you put these loops on the end, you should be able to reuse that wire, which sometimes you need every little bit of wire that you've got. So we're just going to make that straight again for the time being. We may not need it, but just in case. Now you do need at least 3 inches on the end to be able to craft this design. So let's start with the heart shape, shall we? Now at the moment, this design should still just about move up and down. You've got a little bit of flexibility, so making sure that that's centralised is key to giving yourself enough wire on either end. So let's say that this is the heart end. Let's give ourselves a tiny bit of space from the final bead. Let's say that I've put all of my beads in the exact position I want them to remain in. And I'm just a tiny distance away, if I turn that sideways, from the final bead before I make an angle. Now it's not a complete right angle, but it does need to be reasonably strong. So I've got my core wire coming through and then a good sharp angle coming away. It's kind of tricky to show you low down, so I'm just going to bring this up, and I may need to refocus the camera slightly. Let's just bring that up, and then a little bit of camera. There we go. So what we're going to do is use our round pliers now to rotate around to get the first half of the heart. If I put my pliers back in and draw that wire back until it touches that first angle that we made, we need this to be the shape quite far down on your pliers. We need quite a good space in there. If it's too teeny tiny, you'll struggle to get the wonky tuning fork clasp in there. So I'm going to use my bent chain nose pliers now, and I'm just coming along the curve at the top of that heart form, or half a heart so far. I'm going to push that back firmly away, and I'll show you that before I do anything else. So I do want that to be quite close, but you might need to do that in a couple of manoeuvres just to tighten that up slightly. And I want to sit that little bend that we've got there on the imaginary line coming from the core wire. Then we're going to try and recreate the size of that first half of the heart. And you might need to use not a camera in the way to get this to be as neat as possible. So my second half of that heart is slightly larger, so I'm just going to rotate around until it smalls down a bit, and then you'll need to just play with that until it looks a bit like a heart, but it's reasonably the same size on both sides. So it is a case of make the forms and then try to get them to do the thing that you want. So what I'm doing here is just rocking my pliers backwards and forwards until it sits exactly how I want it to sit, which is one of the reasons we leave a bit of a gap here so we don't damage our beautiful faux pearls. So I'm reasonably happy with that heart shape. It's sat pretty symmetrically on the end of that core wire. I'm going to very, very firmly squish that now. If you wanted to delicately hammer that, you may, but I'm just going to give it a hearty squish. We want it to be strong, but we don't want it to change profile. Now what I'm not doing is squishing where the wire crosses over itself. What I will do now is just grip hold of the heart as it crosses over that wire and turn it sideways. And I'm just going to take a second to check that I'm happy with how that all sits. You might need to just play with it slightly. Once you're happy with the heart form, we're going to create a coil around that core, and I'm strongly gripping now, very strongly gripping on that heart shape. I've got 3 wraps on the core wire, so I know that my heart shape is good and strong. You have an opportunity now, if you wanted to add a coil to go over that little section that you've just added, you may, or you can leave it blank as just a coil of wire. It's absolutely up to you. You have an inch of wire here to work with if you wish to. I might take that around one more time so that it sits snugly against that pearl. Of course, grabbing hold of everything as we go. Give that a very, very, very gentle squeeze just to make it nice and neat and tidy, and make sure I'm happy with how that central cleavage on the heart sits. So I think I will put a coil over the surface. If you don't want a coil, decide which is the up or the outside of your bangle. So this is the outside of my bangle because there's my central pearl and the wire is sitting on top of the core. So I need to decide that this is the surface of the design. Therefore, if I'm having a coil, I want the coil to sit on the surface. I don't want it on the inside. It might be uncomfortable. I want it on the outside where it can be seen and is decorative. So I've started to turn the round form around to make a coil. And once I've coiled that up tautly, I'm going to sit that over the wire core. So just draw that all the way down until it sits onto the surface of the bangle design, and then you can just push it down by hand if you wish. So that's the outside of my bangle. You can just twist it slightly if you need to, remembering that this second wire we added is mobile. So if that doesn't go quite to plan, don't fret, you can adapt as you go. So we need now to make the tuning fork gone wrong segment of our stacking bangle. So what we need to do, when we are working with wire and we've absolutely stacked it with beads, we need to have contingency gaps. Contingency gaps are what you need when wire curves. It pushes the beads out slightly because some of the wire is going through at a bit of a funny angle. It's just physics, and I don't really understand physics. I'm not a physicist, I'm not that clever. But what I do know is that you need an extra bit of space at the end. So I call it a contingency space. So what we're going to do is have a quick look at our stacking bangle to be. That's the outside or the top of the design. So I'm going to allow myself probably as much as one of these slightly smaller rondelles. I'm going to put my finger over the top there and I'm going to turn an angle so that as it sits flat on the desk or on your workboard, you've got your flat clasp, you've got the top of the clasp, everything is in the same plane. That core wire is nice and flat. So what we're looking to do now, we've got our first little bit of an angle, and you can see that's probably, gosh, what's that in inches? It's about 1/4 of an inch space I've got here. When we start bending the wire bangle form into a circular shape, some of that's going to be used up by beads and the rest we can fill. So it's smart to allow yourself too much rather than too little. So let's just turn this into a slightly better orientation for describing things. We've got our 1/4 of an inch at the end, and we've got the wire now coming out at about 45 degrees. What I want to do is just grip that first section of angled wire and just push it up slightly. Not completely straight, but you can see we have a bit of a lightning type deviation in the wire. What we're going to do now is come along this wire, probably just under 1/2 an inch. Let's have a look, probably 3/8 of an inch or so. And then I'm going to bring the wire very sharply back down towards that central core. Now I do want these to be snuggled up against each other when we've got there, but it's easier to work if I don't do the squishing just yet. Just before we reach that little deviation, that little lightning deviation, I want to bring that wire back out again in the opposite direction. So we're doing some quite funky little zigzags going on here. If I just give this a quick squish and put it down flat to the board, you'll be able to see what we've achieved so far. Let's twist that so the light dances on it. What I want to do now is make the second half of my tuning fork. Let's just push that into the centre so it sits above that imaginary core line. And we're going to try to create a prong that is the exact same length. If it doesn't go quite right, if you move your wire slowly, let's say that was a little bit too short, you could move the bend up a little bit by opening and closing the pliers, and it just adds the tiniest amount to where that bend exists. You can bring that wire back down and you've got the second half of your weird tuning fork. So let's give that a squish. That needs to be nice and flat and strong anyway. What I want to do now is try to recreate the bend that I made on the first side. So that's around about where the central, the funny little U shape is here. So I bring that back down. Take a look. It looks reasonably symmetrical to me. Hello Donna, how are you? And then I'm going to recreate that funny lightning strike, so it's a tiny amount of wire before we come back down to that centre. When that crosses over your core wire nice and neatly, what we're going to do is grip the tuning fork firmly and then close up that gap with 2 rotations of wire. We're not going to complete this process just yet because we've got to start curving the whole stacking bangle around. So let's give this a squish. So you've got bunny ears or a rubbish tuning fork, and that's one end of your clasp. What we need to do now is tighten up those bunny ears or tuning fork to make them as flat as possible. So I'm going to support them down at the base where all that wiggling is happening and squish those, keeping them as flat as possible. If it does twist and turn, you can usually turn it back over and get it until it sits like 2 hairpin racetrack bends. If I put my finger underneath, you'll be able to see that, especially if it dances in the light. So you've got a rubbish tuning fork or really dodgy skinny bunny ears, however you want to think of it. And we're going to go squish, squish, squish. That needs to be nice and strong. Now, before we finish off wrapping into the gap, we need to know how much of our contingency space is going to be used up. Now, what I might do is just whip these small beads off here before I finish the bangle. This was just as Cherie had a lovely idea about haloing the beads. What I'm going to do is just see if I can get those off so that my finished bangle will be a little more symmetrical. May just have completely broken the whole thing, but let's take those off and see what we can do with it. Let's get that as symmetrical as possible. Do check out my free to view videos on YouTube about haloing and about the Galatea Neptune's rings design. Hopefully there's enough wire left just to get that. There is, look at that. Wow, that was a bit of a risk, but it paid off. So I'm just going to very, very gently protect that faux pearl with my thumbnail whilst I take the tail around, and now my bangle is symmetrical once more. So we've got our heart shape at one end and our dodgy tuning fork bunny ears at the other end. This is the surface of the design, so I want to start bending that around. Now, because we built in a little bit of contingency gap, I'm just going to wiggle all of those beads so I've got the same level of contingency gap at either end. Can you see there's a gap here and a gap here? If you have a round form, this is one of Beadalon's bangle forms, you can use that to help you get a round shape. If you don't have one, you can use whatever you have in your home, a water bottle or a product bottle, and just start moving that around until it fits the perfect form for your desires. So I make mine ever so slightly oval. They're not perfectly round. My wrist certainly isn't round. It's flat on the front and the back. So, well, it's not perfectly flat, but you know what I mean. It's oval rather than round. So I'm just going to manually adjust this until I've used up all of that contingency space, and you'll see that there's much less space available now. The beads have moved around as we've gone from a straight piece of wire to a curved piece of wire. It's completely full at this end, and it's all bar a tiny amount at this end. So this is the point at which I will continue to finish off the clasp idea. Now, if you want to match, you can absolutely go for another coil on the other end, and then they will be similar. So let's just give this a quick rotate around and plant it down firmly on the back of that bunny ear clasp. So I'm going to do this quite quickly because I don't want you to get bored of me doing spirals and coils all the time. I'm just going to push that down real quick. So you can see where we're at now. We've got a heart shape on one end, and then we've got the bunny ears on the other one. So what we need to do now is just check, yeah, we spaced that out correctly. So the prongs are going to fit inside the heart shape. Now the next section can be a little bit unnerving, but please don't be worrying about it. What I'm going to do is squish that until it's super strong. So my tuning fork section is nice and strong. What I want to do is grip that with one pair of pliers on the lower or connected side, and then use a second pair of pliers to bring both of those prongs up to approximately 90 degrees. It's quite soft, it's not sharp at all. So if I take my pliers out and flip that to the side, you can see that the bunny ears are now sticking up, and they fit through the clasp. So that all seems to be working okay for now. What I'm going to do now is manually pull the ends of the bunny ears over to create hooks. What can happen is this central section of the bunny ears will like to go down into the middle. So you can do this with 2 pairs of pliers. I'll hold it like so and use a second pair of pliers just to bring that tip over the top. What will happen if you don't use that second pair of pliers is this central U shape. Let me just get that a tiny bit closer to you. The central U shape can lift out and push down, and it can be uncomfortable in wear, and it weakens the clasp. So once you're happy with that, let's put that on. You will probably need to reform your bangle. So that is the idea. You've enhanced your strands. I'm going to grab them all in because I did promise that I would show them to you again. Let's pop those out of the way for now. This is the naked one, so that shows you the base technique. And then we have got Amazon with those sumptuous, beautiful, verdant greens. Let's pop that one in there. I'm going to show you each of the colours again before I leave you today. Martini Olive, shaken and not stirred. Thank you, Mr. Bond. Who's the new James Bond going to be? Who do you want James Bond to be portrayed by? Water Spout, beautiful, cool colours there. Contrasting deeply with Lava Falls. So I've got my 4 stacking bangles now, but I've got a whole load of other strands just to show you quickly in case you missed it. Chiseled Stone. Contrasting and pairing beautifully with Midnight. I love those two together. I might make a double-stranded bracelet with those. I've also got Samoan Sun. And I have Autumn Blonde. And then I've got 2 quite different pinks. I've got Nosegay, which is a type of posy, and Rose Violet. So, yeah, they're both pink, but they're not the same, are they? I've also got Orange Tiger, which actually, I think with Samoan Sun is a good match. And then I'm finishing up with Caramel Cafe, which works really nicely with Autumn Blonde. So you've got ultimate pairs in these. I would go for those 2. Those 2, those 2, those 2, those 2. And it wouldn't be a sad day to actually have Amazon and Martini Olive pairing together. So you can pair them if you want to. Just again, before I go to show you the naked version of what we've made today, it's a really cool little clasp, which if you want to close up permanently, you absolutely can. Now, which one did we do that to? We did it to Martini Olive. So if you decide that that's a size and you want it as an on-off bangle, not all bangles have to have closures. They can be solid, or they can be hinged, or they can have clasps. So this one is now a solid bangle in Martini Olive. I need them all as well, but definitely Chiseled Stone and Midnight together, that's a pairing made in heaven. Look at those, they're just in love with each other. Let's pop you back up to see me. Yes, it's still me. My camera's gone to sleep, though. Gosh almighty, I don't know quite where that has gone quite so horribly badly. There, that's better. We don't need it looking down there, do we? Crikey O'Reilly. Hello, it's still me, even though my camera went to sleep during that broadcast. How funny is that? Anne says, love them all. Cherie says, need them all. Roberta says, they are all gorgeous. Pink's my favourite colour, so I'll lean towards those 2. Isn't it gorgeous, though, that you can have 2 strands that are pink, but so different? Karen says, thank you, Jem. I'll have to reply just as I just came in. Well, hello and welcome. You can always watch on replay if you want to see the technique. Prayers for Maria from Anne. Thank you, my darling. Tutau in Texas says, another great class, Jen. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being with me today. I love hanging out with my Jessie James bead friends on a Thursday. I will be back next week, and I'm also going to be at the winter, I keep calling it Winter Wonderland. It's absolutely not what it's called. Holiday 2022. Come and join us. If you haven't booked on to the winter workshop and you feel like you might need a little bit of temptation, drop me an inbox, because I might be able to just, you know. Love your candy cane, says Cherie. Thank you very much. I will definitely be watching again and again, says Lynn. Love the new class, says Linda. Love them, says Sharon. They're beautiful, says Kay. Karen says replay, lol. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to be with you today. I look forward to coming back very, very soon. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. From myself, Jem, and from everyone at Jessie James Beads, have the most wonderful day. Mwah. Bye for now.